Okay, now I'm going to introduce Katja Schechtner. Katja holds a dual appointment with MIT Media Lab and the Asian Development Bank to create and implement large-scale urban technology investment programs by integrating new data technologies with best practice in urban planning and management. Katja also serves as an advisor for several European research institutions and the EU Commission, lectures at university in the US, Austria and China, and has published widely, including 2 books on urban data and accountability technologies. She has a background in architecture, urban studies, management and technology assessment from Columbia, the UK and Vienna University of Technology. Most recently, she has been selected as a Rockefeller Global Social Innovation Fellow. Congratulations, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Anton. Yeah, I really love the Rockefeller Fellowship because it will give me a year for thinking and traveling next year, which I sorely need to make a little bit more sense of what I'm going through now. And this relates to my talk, and this relates to a discussion we had before about the local and the global, and the local. So a term a year, 3 or 4 months a year, I spend at MIT Media Lab, which is like the future of the future. There's all kinds of technologies at my fingertips. Anything that I want or have or a call, Google is a call away if I need any kind of technology. This is where I live for 3 or 4 months a year. The other time, 8 or 9 months a year, I actually live in Asia. And I do not live in Shanghai or Singapore or Seoul. I live in Manila. There's 24 million people, of which 40% of them live of less than $2 a day. And I have a beautiful house, but it shares a wall with the slum. And in Manila, in there, my job is to include technology, to see how we can use it and handle it, to make better urban mobility projects throughout Asia, because I'm working for the Asian Development Bank. We spend about $4 billion a year for new investments to build new transport routes or bus rapid transit systems or any kind of those things. And we really need to be better focused on how we spend the money, how we can do the planning, but how we can do the operations. And this going back and forth between the future of the future and sometimes the medieval past influences me and my thinking currently a lot. So on one hand, we live in a data-rich world. There is millions of sensors around us who track where we go, with whom we interact, and when we do it. We can monitor our personal behavior to a very, very intrinsic detail. We also have, and I live in a people-rich Asia, where millions of people actually express what they want and what they do and where they go every day. We know, or we would like to know, where they go, when they go, what they do and what they need. So it should be easy now. We should be absolutely easy to calculate the response. We know what people are going to, we know where they want to go to. We know, therefore, what we need. We have millions of them, billions of them, we should be working with, so it should be easy to calculate the response. However, in my daily work on both sides of the world, there's 3 immensely difficult aspects of combining the future with the medieval past. And this is the intrinsic technological and cultural details of data collection, data analysis, and data visualization. Now, while we think we are perfectly monitored by the sensors, by our mobile phones when we go around, the reality in Asia, especially in the developing countries, and we're talking Indonesia, we're talking Cambodia, we're talking 250 million people alone in Indonesia or 100 million in the Philippines. It's extremely expensive. The data we have is really scarce. It's fragmented. The few people who have it really do not like to share. And so what we end up is with an overuse of the same kind of data all over and over and over again to do everything from calculating and thinking about business to like how do we and where do we do plan infrastructure, where do we do plan roads, where do we do plan a bus transit system. And even if we have data, and I've been suffering through this for the last 3 years, so I'm working on a new project about this, is we have data about the infrastructure, but we know very, very little about the people. Why is that so? Because overall, I mean, electricity is electricity. Electrons don't flow the other way in Asia. Mobile phones. You have all heard that everybody now has mobile phones. No, like it's great. Everybody can afford them. They even become very cheap in Shenzhen. But no. In the areas we're talking about, it's not about to use mobile phones to understand about people. You don't need the mobile phone. You need to understand the records, the tracking records of where people make phone calls. Now, 90% of the contracts in Asia are prepaid contracts. That means you give them $10 and then you use your phone for whatever you need to do with, and then at a certain point it's used and you buy new ones. But what that means is that the companies don't need to keep the billing records like we do here in Europe, because they don't have to show you that you actually use those because you have prepaid. With this means all the data from 90% of the mobile phones, you lose them. So no, we do not know where people go, especially in Asia, even if they use mobile phones. Also, we see that there is a shared use of mobile phones, so people don't keep it all the time for themselves, also like they barter it. I have in Manila house staff. One of my houseboys, he's 24 years old. About every 6 weeks, he gives me a new phone number because he has bartered his phone to go out on the weekend with his friends for beers or so, gets a new one, sells it over there. So you can never be sure that the phone you use, what we use for data analysis in the States or in Europe, is your own. Another one is like, the smartphone. We can use the GPS tracks. GPS tracks are even better than mobile phone tracks. Mobile phone only give you basically origin destination. GPS can track you. It's what all of you use when you use the Google Maps and try to find your way around. Now, one smartphone is a full year of income for 30% of the population in the Philippines, and the Philippines is a middle-income country, so it's actually already quite developed. Now guess what? How many people do you think have a smartphone? Even if the price comes down to $100 or $130, that is half a month's salary of my driver. The next thing is data visualization. We all think when we have data and we show, people will see the impact and they will like it. What you see here is pages. It's each and every one of those is a pages of a PhD work. It's the famous PhD thesis of Theodor Karl zu Guttenberg. He was the former German defense minister, and everything you see colored in here is where he plagiarized something in his work. So this is basically where he copied stuff. I think there is a page where he didn't. Two pages. Now, why do I show this in this context? There was rumors for more than a year that he had plagiarized his PhD thesis. But only after many people came together anonymously and started working and reading through his thing and trying to figure it out. And they used this visualization not to make it pretty or beautiful or to show something. They used it as a tool for themselves to understand which pages had been looked through and where did we find the different sources that he just had copied. Only after this picture was shown, he was brought down. I think he's now working in an American think tank, bidding out his time until repentance is done and he can come back. It helps if you're from a very rich family. So why do I show this data visualization in this context? Why do I not show an image or something from Asia or Asian mobility? It is because governments in Asia are extremely sensitive to the power images have. It's one of those communication channels you have, and that spread very quickly. And they try to avoid not only the data collection that would tell them what's actually happened, or the development of the data analysis methods, because everybody thinks we can use those from the US anyway, but also because images can be very strong, and they try to avoid to show where they did not build public transport systems, or where people live that do not have access to markets. Now, we had this as a background thinking, but we looked into deeper into this. Like, we wanted to understand now how much has big data been used in Southeast Asia. And especially as I always, everywhere, I mean at MIT, everybody shoots a new startup at me and we will leapfrog with mobile phone and GPS data. We will save the world. All of us know that in Kenya, this M-Prize system, it's perfect. People can work with it. They build their own apps on it. It will bring up development and help the betterment of people. Well, can we just scale it up, transfer it? Now, if we look in 2013, we did that study. We looked on where are we? Well, Singapore is implementing complex wide-scale initiatives. They're using mobile phone data and weather data, combining it to tell you where the next taxi will go. Perfect. But that's a tiny, tiny, tiny spot in Asia. We have found in the Philippines and Thailand, and I'll go a little bit deeper into that, they're introducing basic or pilot initiatives. I'll show you what basic and pilot I mean, and they are already far ahead. There's initial discussion and interest, and there's absolutely no projects that we could find in 2013 or nothing when we tried to discuss it with any of those governments. You know, what's your ICT policy or any of those kinds. We didn't find anything in Myanmar, Laos, or Brunei. In the Philippines, to show you what we mean if we say they have a few initiatives, is they propose to put GPS trackers on Manila buses so they would know which route they take. 40% of the people traveling in Manila use informal transport. That means that part of the room has never ever entered on their daily commute any official transport system, like a taxi or bus or anything. They all use informal transit, which might be buses or jeepneys or little taxis, or basically someone having a kind of carriage, a rickshaw, anything to get people from point A to point B, but only if you're part of that system. Only if you're living there and knowing it, you can use it, because otherwise the knowledge about this informal system, the routes they take, how you get from point A to B, is opaque to you. There's a few other things that they do, transit mapping or Davao. We have, of course, in all the Asian countries, either Cisco or IBM working with cities to try to sell them new technology and data to implement. Similar for Vietnam, the difference in Vietnam is they have, at least on the government level, an intelligent transportation system strategy. So they have at a government level the knowledge about what mobile phone data can potentially serve with, how you could potentially interact with Google to get your map data, how you could work with this, or how you can actually implement technology. Now, why do I think, or why do we think that it's so important to tailor this technology that should be culture agnostic to the developing country context, and not only the global developing country context, but very locally, very much pinpointed at the very much culture that we're working with. I've talked that Vietnam has this great strategy to implement intelligent transportation systems. So maybe you want to follow me to Vietnam. This is Ho Chi Minh City, and it's a street crossing over there. And what you see is there is this policeman trying to stem the traffic and make it flow in another direction. He does that every day, and he does that not only on himself, he does it with hundreds of other people, policemen in the city trying to make the traffic flow. It's bad work. It doesn't really, the work is not very nice to do. It's hard, and he also cannot perform very well because, to make traffic flow in one direction and also have the crossings work in the other ones, you basically need to know what the other people on the other crossings do. You might see one, but you don't see everybody. So in come very well-meaning people with a lot of money. A development agency, hand in hand with a big international smart city and technology provider, and they say, guys, we're gonna help you. This is gonna be easy, and we know you're a developing country, so we don't give you super expensive tech. What we will give you is sensors underground. They will count the people that go over it. We will link it with a traffic lighting system and a central monitoring system, and basically, based on how many people use your roads, we can guide and make the traffic flow in Ho Chi Minh City. It should work a lot better. It's tested technology. We know how to use it. No problem. And we have the funding for it because we have a bank with us who can do it. So what they do is they dig up Ho Chi Minh City street, put in the sensors. It's 2 years of really getting the whole thing done. And then there's one day when they flip the switch, and this is what happened. Complete and utter chaos. Why? Well, how many of you have been to Vietnam before? Anyone? Okay, so what's, if you think about Vietnam traffic, what do you think about? Scooters. So Vietnam runs on scooters. I mean, it's like there's hundreds and thousands and millions of scooters. The sensors in the ground are magnetic field sensors. They sense the cars. They do not sense the little scooters. So, culture eats technology for breakfast. If you do not tailor it very intrinsically to the culture you're working with, you are losing every potential that is in technology to actually make it better. To use traffic sensors and to combine it with any kind of information mechanism helps us get around a lot better in Vienna or in any of the European cities. That's great. But only because the people engineering it know something first, have an intrinsic knowledge about the technology, about our way to go ahead, which is currently car-based. I guess the same system wouldn't work as well in Copenhagen now. Okay, so while I'm a lot of times confronted with the idea, we bring in big data, we use new technology, and then we will calculate the response, and it will immediately be a better life for the people out there, smart cities, IBM, Siemens, Cisco. This is not what's happening. What is happening and how we can have a way forward is 3 or 4 examples that I want to show you. So I said before that about 40% of the people are using informal transit. Informal transit basically means the authorities don't know anything about where people are going from point A to B, and the people who are using it only know it from experience. In came at a certain time Sarah Williams. She's now a professor at MIT. She went to Nairobi, and there they have those little buses. Basically, those buses are privately owned. The people in the buses are private operators. They are together in clans, but they are fighting against each other, basically. And she put people with a phone, an app, GPS, on those buses, and she mapped for the first time the informal routes that people could take in Nairobi. And then she did 2 things with it when we talk about visualization. She put this on paper maps. She worked with the drivers of the Matatus buses. She also worked with the authorities. She put it on paper maps, and for the first time, people could see if they could actually find a better way to switch from point A to B. But she also, and this is astounding, she also negotiated with Google that the GTFS standard is the Google standard for all the maps. And now the informal transit of Nairobi is the first informal transport network in the world that's represented on Google Maps, if you want to use it. And this is a big step forward. We have been working with similar projects now in Davao, in Cebu, in Dhaka, to try to get the informal transit on the map. But of course, not only on the map of the Google internet thing, because I just told you, quite a lot of people don't have access to it, but also to have it really on printed out maps. Similar, we did a study with mobile phone data records. Previously I said most of those phone data is thrown away because it's prepaid. In this instance, we could work together with the largest mobile phone provider in Bangladesh, very closely related to a Nobel Prize winner there. What we got was the mobile phone data records, and we could see, because we wanted to put in a big new transport, public transport system based on buses, and the authorities always told us, the poor people, they stay out in their quarters anyway, they don't come for work downtown. So what we actually don't need, we don't need long lines outside serving the poor, we need something better for the inner city. Quite easy to show them that that was not the case when we looked at where the mobile phone started in the morning, went during the day and got back to the evening. We found, it's unfortunately not visible here, a second cluster, a possibility to put a second center over there, and it helped us a lot to convince people there and to plan new bus rapid transit routes that don't only serve the rich people, but actually help and work with those communities that were literally off the map. Similar, we also work in Pakistan. Now, if I ask for volunteers to come with me to Pakistan, to Kathmandu, okay, to map the streets out there, there's not so many people, and if you have to pay them, you have to pay them a lot of money, and then when you go there, you have those two guys with the machine guns next to you. So what we work with is satellite images to show and help us comparing over time. What you see, the red lines are where new streets have been built in the last 5 to 10 years. I think this is the 5-year picture. And we want to put in a bus rapid transit system so we know where we can go when we actually go out for the field and really work with the people, at which areas we need to look at what areas we need to focus on if we want to build new corridors, so the traffic jams that you currently have in all those cities, and that make it really difficult for the already poor to participate in the economy, to work with them. This is a project where the European Space Agency gave us $1 million in method development and $1 million worth in images, and we worked around on about 20 countries that were interesting that had either security issues or climate-related issues where it was difficult to get to the areas where we wanted to look and plan. Finally, to show you that the scale is not always like the satellite pictures. Many of the countries we work in, many of the cities we work in, when we talk about urban change, we still have to face the fact that flooding is a common occurrence. From Kathmandu to Lumbini in Nepal. Lumbini is the birthplace of Buddha. It has an incredible tourism potential to go there. However, it is flooded regularly. And next to the mass transport systems, we all have the small informal things where we want to go. So what we developed is a new pedicab that worked in a very specific way so that the drivers need less energy to actually pedal the same amount of people. In this backside of this rickshaw pedicab, you would assume there's 1 or 2 people Believe me, I've sat in those things with 5 or 6 people and 2 of them climbing on a bumper in the backside. And it matters if this driver needs 1 or 2 bowls of rice more a day or not. So even if you're able to reduce his intake, his needed intake of 300 or 400 calories per day by designing this in a way that you don't have as much Luftwiderstand, whatever, air pressure against you. The whole thing is lightweight. At the same time, during floods, those pedicaps are sometimes, for the most vulnerable people, the last way of resort to get out there for handicapped people or so. So what we did is the platform is more than 30 centimeters above ground. So for the first starts of flooding, this is what about you have in Lumbini. You can still use the pedicab and get along and get it out, because we have 2 models of it. One is normally pedaled by the people, but we also have it with an electric drivetrain. We also crowdsourced by not crowdsourcing by clicking. Actually, it was just the old interviews where we go out in the streets and ask people and then have focus groups and talk with people. That one of the most important parts of them was to have a modesty panel between the driver and the people in the backside who are driven. They just don't want to be as close to the driver's backside. So those little things of comfort make their life a lot better, and it's for us, it's just a little one more panel that we can put in there that actually in the end helped us with stability as well. We are currently producing those pedicaps at about, I think, $750. And now the important question for us is, again, we're looking at the economic models of how people use pedicaps or rickshaws or tricycles in the cities where we look into, because you cannot just go and give those people the pedicaps and then 500 of them just make more money, because you will ruin a whole infrastructure. One of those things that the Bill Gates Foundation did, they had a lot of mobile phones. They went out, gave it to the people. It destroyed the little phone shops that had it before. After a while, the people could not afford the energy to load their phones, nor the load to actually call. But 2 months is long enough to ruin a business, the businesses that had the women who had the phone shops before, so that after a while there was no communication, but a lot of electronic trash lying around. Well, with this, showing you big data to small data and how we have to put it in the right context, I'll end up with one of my favorite visualizations. It's an old map, handcrafted, showing you the internet connections, the undersea cables for the internet that are currently out there in Southeast Asia. And I think this is one of the most important parts that I'll try to think about in the next year, and also like, how can we tailor the technologies? How can we really make use of the promises of big data and technology in local contexts, in the right time frame, and in a way to actually support the people? Thank you very much.